Hi, let's look at something slightly different today. I will be discussing how the Claremont era X books are collected in the omnibus format. If you're unaware, the omnibus format refers to collected edition that are hardcover and oversized and typically runs over 1,000 pages per volume. Here's a comparison to normal size comics and a oversized comics omnibus collection. When I say Claremont era, I'm referring to his initial 16 plus year run as the Uncanny X-Men writer between Giant Size X-Men #1 and X-Men #3. Yes, I'm aware that he did not write Giant Size X-Men #1 and that he only scripted 94 and 95, if I remember correctly. This video came about because a friend asked me recently if he should pick up a particular omnibus, and in the process of answering his question, it occurred to me that while the information might be available, they are quite disparate and may not be easy for someone not familiar with the X book in this era to grasp. As an overview, we are looking at three main titles here: Uncanny X-Men, New Mutants, and X Factor. I've also included Excalibur here because two issues are collected in one of the omnibus, which we will get into later. As you can see, the three titles ran pretty much on its own, with some crossing over now and then. Of note, there are 4 crossovers / events during this period, which we will see a little bit more crisscrossing of books when we get to those events and crossover. So let's start from the beginning. Uncanny X-Men Omnibus 1 collects Giant Size X-Men 1, which leads into X-Men 94. The book officially changes from X-Men to Uncanny X-Men with issue 114, and the volume ends with issue 131. It is pretty straightforward here. Included in this volume is also X-Men Annual 3, which is the only X title to be drawn by George Perez, if I remember correctly. Of note, this volume ends in the middle of the Dark Phoenix saga. The next volume is also very straightforward. It starts from issue 132 of Uncanny X-Men up to issue 151. Two annuals, 4 and 5, are also collected in this volume, as well as Avengers Annual 10, which is an important issue as it features the first appearance of a fan favorite character, even though she looks nothing like her current self at that time. Also collected in this volume are these extra materials. The Phoenix Untold story is the original ending for the Dark Phoenix saga, which then editor Jim Shooter objected to. Claremont and Byrne had to scramble a last-minute change, even though everything was already drawn and ready for printing. As you can see, these volumes strive to be as complete as possible, which is why they are pretty popular amongst fans. One common question regarding this period is, what about the classic X-Men omnibus? Do I need them since they are reprints? I understand the confusion. Classic X-Men is a title that reprints Uncanny X-Men starting from Giant Size X-Men in the mid-1980s. The first 44 issues included a backup story, as well as the reprinted issue with changes. Claremont went back and added or changed panels in the reprint issues, and sometimes even just word bubbles, which, as you can see here, are explained and included in this omnibus. So effectively, these are the director's cut of those issues, and this omnibus is what Peter M, Crisis with a K, coined as the DVD extras. So, the material collected in this omnibus are the backup stories as well as an explanation of what was added or changed from the original issues. Incidentally, the director cut of these issues were actually the issues that I read, because when I first started reading X-Men via my uncle's collection, it starts from the Fall of the Mutants. And as there were no collector's editions apart from some trade paperback like the Dark Phoenix saga then, I had to rely on classic X-Men to read these back issues. So when I finally read the Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 1 in 2016, I believe, I was a little bit confused as they differ slightly from what I remembered. And that is why. So do you need this omnibus? If you are a completist, I would say yes, because some of these story elements from the backup stories were picked up by writers like 20, 30, 40 years after they were first published. Unfortunately, this volume is out of print, so hopefully Marvel will reprint this someday. Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 3 collects Uncanny X-Men issue 154 through 175, as well as annual 6 and 7. It also includes the excellent God Loves, Man Kills graphic novel and two miniseries, the original Wolverine mini by Claremont and Frank Miller, and Magic Mini. This volume has some of the most amazing art from the likes from artists like Dave Cockrum, Brent Anderson, Bill Sienkiewicz, Paul Smith, Frank Miller, and Michael Golden. It is also around this time that Marvel decided that the mutants are popular enough to warrant a second title, and that's how New Mutants came about. We will come to that in a bit. Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 4 collects issue 176 through 193 and annual 8. It also includes Kitty Pryde and Wolverine Mini, as well as X-Men and Alpha Flight two-parter. These two volumes are very straightforward. Okay, back to the New Mutants Omnibus Volume 1, which collects the New Mutant issues that spans these two Uncanny X-Men volumes, starting from Marvel Team Up 100, which is a Kama story. Issue 1 through issue 34 of New Mutants are collected here, as are the graphic novel that launched the series and New Mutants Annual 1. As you can see, there are some double dipping of issues with Uncanny X-Men Omnibus, but across the three omnibus, double dipping 9 issues of comics is really not a lot. I mean, it amounts percentage-wise, it amounts up to maybe less than 1% of the issues collected. Also of note here, this volume collects Bill Sienkiewicz's entire run as the regular penciler in New Mutants. Next up is Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5. This volume collects Uncanny X-Men 194 through 209 and includes New Mutants Special Edition 1 and Uncanny X-Men Annual 9, as Guardian War is the name given to this story. It also includes New Mutant Annual 2, which is part 1 of a two-part story that leads directly into Uncanny X-Men Annual 10, set in Mojoverse. The Nightcrawler and Long Shot miniseries are also included here. X Factor started around this time. As you can see, the events leading to the beginning of X Factor started in an Avengers title. A lot was going on behind the scenes regarding how X Factor came about. Claremont wasn't involved in the title, which ultimately led to reviving Jean, an idea that came initially from Kurt Busiek as a disgruntled fan at the end of Dark Phoenix saga. Remember how Jim Shooter wanted a change to the ending of the Dark Phoenix saga? He was also the one who approved resurrecting Jean. Ann Nocenti, who was the X editor at the time, did not tell Claremont until late on a Friday night after she brought him out for dinner and drinks to soften him up a bit. If I remember correctly, that's what she said in a panel at a Comic-Con. And there was a little bit of a scramble and changes, and the end result is no one involved in this was happy. Anyway, for the purpose of this video, X-Factor was started around this time. The next omnibus volume is the Mutant Massacre Omnibus. As you can see, it contains only one issue of New Mutants. Uncanny X-Men 210 and through 219 and X-Factor 9 through 17 are also included in this omnibus volume. Note, this omnibus contains issue not only of the Mutant Massacre crossover event, it also includes issues that came after, which is why you have issues like Fantastic Four versus X-Men and X-Men versus the Avengers. This makes sense because the aftermath is really important for this particular crossover, as it is one of the most devastating story that that the mutants had to endure up to this point, and probably so for many years to come, until maybe we get to decimation. Now, this volume is also one that collects across the titles. It is no longer an Uncanny X-Men Omni, or New Mutants Omni, or an X-Factor Omni, which leads us to New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2. This volume covers the period between Uncanny X-Men Omnibus 5 and Mutant Massacre Omnibus, collecting New Mutants issue 35 through 54, and the Firestar and Fallen Angels miniseries. Similar to New Mutants Omnibus Volume 1, there are again some double dipping of issues with Uncanny X-Men. And this time it is with Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5 and Mutant Massacre Omnibus. Again, if we have to count, it's about 9 regular comic issues. I mean, I count an annual as 2 regular comic issues. So, 9 issues worth of double dips, I think that is acceptable across 3 omnibus. You can now see a problem. We have one chunk of X-Factor not collected. To put things in perspective, these omnibus volumes were not published in sequence. The Mutant Massacre event was originally collected as an oversized hardcover, which I have here. Mine actually had a quick sketch by Walt Simonson when I met him in late 2015, which is why I still keep this book. Marvel then publishes the Mutant Massacre Omnibus. So the expectation at that time was that there will be an omnibus that covers all 3 titles that will bridge the gap between Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 4 and Mutant Massacre Omnibus. And this expectation came about because all the volumes that came after Mutant Massacre spans across 3 titles and were released and had been released and published before the announcement of Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5. But then Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 5 was announced. So together with New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2, for ex-completist collectors like me, whom have been collecting these oversized volumes for years, I was more than a little bit upset and surprised. Surprised because Marvel, especially on the X-Omni front, has been very mindful and strive to collect these omnibus volumes in the most complete fashion as possible. Luckily for us, Marvel had a plan. Roughly a year later, they announced that the Mutant Massacre Prelude Omnibus will contain all issues in Uncanny X-Men Volume 5, as well as the chunk of X-Factor issues, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four issue, X-Factor issue 1 to 8, and others, leading all the way up to Mutant Massacre. So which volume should you buy? Let's park that question away for now. The answer needs a bit more of a complete picture. What comes next is the Fall of the Mutants Omnibus, and it collects issues that came directly after Mutant Massacre Omnibus and New Mutant Omnibus Volume 2. As you can see, all three titles are collected here. The Fall of the Mutants is not really a crossover. It is kind of a unified banner under which the individual stories ran. Like New Mutants 55 to 61 is its own thing. Uncanny X-Men through 220 to 227 is its own thing. X Factor 18 to 26 is its own thing. The X Factor material up to this point, X Factor 1 through 26 and all the earlier Avengers, Fantastic Four, and Iron Man issues are also collected here in X Factor, the original X-Men Omnibus Volume 1, and includes these extra materials while leaving these out. And that gets us to the next chunk of material collected in the Inferno Prologue Omnibus. Once again, apart from one issue of Uncanny X-Men, the three titles mostly ran its own story. X Factor 27 to 32, Uncanny X-Men 228 to 238, and New Mutants 62 through 70 are collected in this volume. The three annuals collected here, X Factor Annual 3, Uncanny X-Men Annual 12, and New Mutants Annual 4, are part of the Evolutionary War event that ran across several Marvel annuals. And then came the Inferno Omnibus. There is a little bit more crisscrossing of issues here, mostly between X Factor and Uncanny X-Men in the latter half of the event, and between Exterminators and New Mutants. Although Colossus did appear in the New Mutants side of the story, as well as the Uncanny X-Men and X-Factor side, each of these two story tracks can be read and understood without the other. The Inferno Omnibus also included issues that were previously collected in a Inferno crossover oversized hardcover, shown here. And that includes 2 issues of Excalibur. These stories are what I call side branches of the main Inferno story. They do not impact anything that happens in the 2 main storylines, and that includes these 2 issues of Excalibur. And I've put them here and show you that these 2 issues are also collected in Excalibur Omnibus Volume 1. That is the extent of the crossover with Excalibur during this Claremont era. Excalibur is mainly its own thing, and for people who are interested to know if there are some double dipping or whatever with Excalibur, this is it. Just 2 issues, nothing. There were no active crossover from Excalibur to the other 3 X titles, nor vice versa. So up to this point, we have Omnibus that collects across all 3 titles and named after events and crossover. And as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, collected in the most complete fashion possible. Here is where it all breaks apart as of the making of this video. The Uncanny X-Men issues before Extinction Agenda crossover are completely collected in the now out of print X-Men by Claremont Lee Omnibus Volume 1, which collects Uncanny X-Men 244 through 269 and Annual 13, and some extra material drawn by Jim Lee. The New Mutant issues before Extinction Agenda is partially collected in New Mutant Omnibus Volume 3, which, as you can see, contains a lot of double dipping. Apart from New Mutants 74 through 85, and some extra materials like Spellbound Issue 4 and X-Men Odd Man Out that fit kind of into the New Mutants issue collected in this volume, the majority of this omnibus volume are collected in the previous 3 omnibus. X Factor 41 to 59 is currently not collected in any oversized hardcover volumes. Then comes the Extinction Agenda Omnibus, which comprises the 9 issues crossover, New Mutants issues 95 to 97, Uncanny X-Men 270 to 272, and X Factor 60 to 62 that were previously collected as an oversized hardcover. And included in this omnibus is a bunch of unrelated issues that are kind of published around this time. Though I believe the King of Pain's annual, New Mutants annual 7, New Warriors annual 1, Uncanny X-Men annual 15, and X Factor annual 6 were actually published slightly later. The Extinction Agenda is the first real crossover in X books, with chapter 1 in Uncanny X-Men, then chapter 2 in New Mutants, going into chapter 3 in X Factor, and then coming back to Uncanny X-Men for chapter 4 and so on. I have quite a bit to say here, but let's just finish up the very last bit first. The next and final chunk of material in the Claremont era are collected in 2 omnibus. The X Factor and Uncanny X-Men issues, X Factor 63 to 70 and Uncanny X-Men 273 to 280, are collected in the X-Men by Claremont Lee Omnibus Volume 2, which also collects X-Men issue 1 to 9 and the crossover with Ghost Rider and some of Jim Lee drawn X-Men pages, I think in X-Men issue 9 and 10 before he left to set up Image. The last 3 issues of New Mutants are collected in X-Force Omnibus Volume 1, which also include X-Force 1 to 15 and the crossover with Spider-Man and the first Cable miniseries. So as it stands, 2 small chunks of material are not collected in an oversized hardcover format. X Factor 41 to 59 and New Mutants 86 to 95 and New Mutants Annual 5. Incidentally, New Mutants 86 is the first appearance of Cable. What really stumped me is the Extinction Agenda Omnibus. It contains a bunch of unrelated issues for some reason. I thought a better way to collect these issues would be similar to the 3 omnibus that came before, like collecting issues across the 3 main titles and name it after an event or crossover, say Inferno Aftermath Omnibus or the Road to Extinction Omnibus, or even a remap Extinction Agenda Omnibus that includes some issues leading to the event all the way up to the end of the event. So we have about 70 issues of material here. And if we include the 9 issues of Extinction Agenda crossover and the Days of Future Present annuals, Uncanny X-Men Annual 14, Fantastic Four Annual 23, New Mutants Annual 6, and X Factor Annual 5, in total, that is a 87 regular issues worth of material. So this can easily be split into 2 omnibus with extras that replace the currently out of print Claremont Lee Omnibus Volume 1 and the newly announced Extinction Agenda Omnibus. Alternatively, a less likely scenario in my mind, Marvel could reprint the X-Men by Claremont Lee Omnibus Volume 1, keep the Extinction Agenda Omnibus, and collects the chunk of New Mutants and X Factor issues as something like New Mutants X Factor by Louise Simonson Omnibus, and even include the 3 issues of X-Men Legends that she and Walt Simonson worked on not too long ago to bridge this gap. But anyway, as it stands, how should one collect all these materials? The first portion is very simple. You buy Uncanny X-Men Omnibus Volume 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're also interested in New Mutants, pick up New Mutants Omnibus Volume 1. After that, you have a decision to make. Are you interested in only X-Men, New Mutants, and or X-Factor, but not everything? Or are you a X-completist who wants everything mutants related? If you're only interested in one or more of the three titles, but not all three, pick up the title-specific omnibus. So for Uncanny X-Men, picked up on Omnibus Volume 5. I believe Volume 6 and 7 are already mapped out. I think I've heard it from either Omar of Near Mint Condition or Peter M, Crisis with a K. And my best guess is Volume 6 and 7 will go all the way up to Uncanny X-Men 269, right before Extinction Agenda. And it will also consist of other issues needed to make it completely standalone, including the Inferno X-Factor crossover issues. For New Mutants, you could pick up New Mutants Omnibus 2 and 3 in addition to Volume 1. However, that is not perfect because there's a missing 10 issues of New Mutants from the end of Omnibus Volume 3 to the start of the Extinction Agenda crossover. I do not know why that is the case here. I also do not see how that gap could be bridged unless they do a volume 4 of New Mutants that covers material in Extinction Agenda as well as X-Force Omni Volume 1 and maybe call it Cable and the New Mutants Omnibus. After all, Marvel did name the omnibus that came after X-Force Omnibus Volume 1 as Deadpool and X-Force Omnibus. In total, there are 41 regular issues plus 4 annuals, which will make it about 49 regular issues. It is a rather large volume, but I think it is doable. For X-Factor, you could pick up X-Factor, the original X-Men Volume 1 on Omnibus. It is a bit of a gamble here, but I think X-Factor, the original X-Men Volume 2 Omnibus will happen, and it will cover all material up to Extinction Agenda. And that will also include Uncanny X-Men issues in Inferno to make it as standalone as possible. Regardless of which title or two you choose to collect, I will adopt a wait-and-see approach with Extinction Agenda Omnibus, assuming FOMO does not take over. It is a good idea to wait and see how things will be collected before proceeding. If you are an ex-completist, picked up the Mutant Massacre Prelude, Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno Prologue, Inferno Omnibus, as well as New Mutant Omnibus Volume 2. So what do you do with materials that come after Inferno? If you're like me and have these other volumes, the two Claremont Lee Omnis, the X-Force Omni Volume 1, and the Extinction Agenda oversized hardcover, not the omnibus, which the hardcover only includes the 9 issues of crossover. My inclination is to wait and see. I will not advise picking up New Mutants Volume 3 because that is a lot of double dipping just to get 10 issues of New Mutants plus some extras. If you have the original Extinction Agenda oversized hardcover, try and find Days of Future Past oversized hardcover. If you really want the Days of Future Present story that runs across the 4 annuals, Uncanny X-Men Annual 14, Fantastic Four Annual 23, New Mutants Annual 6, and X-Factor Annual 5, instead of picking up Extinction Agenda Omnibus. The Days of Future Past oversized hardcover also includes a double dip of the original Days of Future Past story, and and 3 Excalibur issues. But you also get Wolverine Days of Future Past mini, which is not collected anywhere as far as I know, as well as Hulk Broken World issue 2. If you do not have the Extinction Agenda oversized hardcover, it is up to you. My inclination here is still to wait and see. Somehow I feel like the whole chunk of materials post Inferno is going to be collected completely in 2 separate omnibus, which I mentioned earlier, and that will include the Extinction Agenda issues. If that is going to happen, it would kind of sucks for people like me who have everything except those 20 issues of X Factor and 21 issues of New Mutants. But double dipping 27 issues of Uncanny X-Men to get 41 issues of X Factor and New Mutants is an easier pill to swallow for me. All right, this is a very long video. I hope it is useful. Let me know in the comments if I got anything wrong or if there are news that I wasn't aware of. And also let me know if you like to see more videos of this type. If you like this video, please help me out by hitting subscribe and like, sharing the video, and commenting. Thank you for watching and staying for the entire length of the video. Tyler, out.